Thanks for joining, everyone. My name is Jared Michalec. I am VP of Innovation and AI Applications here at Salient Process, and I'm joined by Michael Hinds, who's America's Senior Business Automation Leader with IBM. We're going to take you through a bit of a journey here to talk about some of the benefits that many of our customers and partners are seeing when they're combining the IBM Cognos Analytics platform with IBM Process Mining. This is part one of two in a series, where the second part, we're going to get into a little bit more of the integration, kind of lifting the hood, how it works, and we're also going to talk a little bit about planning analytics and how that plays a role into this story as well. But for today, we're going to focus in on process mining and Cognos. So let's go ahead and get started. So just a quick run through on the agenda. We're going to try to target about 30 to 40 minutes with some time for Q&A at the end. But depending on kind of what we're showing and what we dig into, we may go a little bit longer than that. But feel free to stay on or drop off and then review the recording later as you see fit. We're going to go into the problem statement, talk about why this is an important aspect. We're going to cover briefly both of the technologies in case you are new to either Cognos Analytics or to process mining or both, and then a bit on the solution overview of what this actually looks like and some of the key benefits, and then we'll get into a live demo. That's going to be the bulk of this session. We're going to spend about 10 or 15 minutes walking through a live demonstration of both Cognos Analytics as well as how process mining can apply to those use cases, and then we'll wrap up with some Q&A. So with that, let's jump into the problem statement and talk about some of the benefits and examples of where we can leverage data from an organization. And these are just the top 10 examples that we came up with. The possibilities are endless. There's so many different things that we can look at from a data standpoint, and data is king. We can't do real intelligent decision-making without data. We can't do things like artificial intelligence without data. And so we're going to see a lot of use cases around how data is involved in these business applications and business decisions that are being made. And what we want to do is break this up into three main categories, right, or main perspectives. The first is, where are we, right? What is the state? What is the health of the business right now? What is going on? What are some key performance indicators that I need to pay attention to? What's the temperature of my core operations and some of the things that are going on around the business? Second is, where are we going, right? As I have this data, I have this information that I can make more intelligent decisions on top of. How do I plan? How do I look forward and think about how many products I need to order for my customers, or plan out from a supply chain standpoint? How do I schedule my trucks or my deliveries? How do I accommodate a surge in patients in a healthcare facility? So looking forward is another big piece of this. But the third piece is what we're going to talk about today, which is, how did we get here, right? I have all of this information that was collected over the course of weeks, months, years, and what I need to do is understand what are some of the patterns that occurred, what's the root cause, what led up to this, and if we think about this from a product perspective, we can break this up into Cognos Analytics as kind of the current state of the business. Where are we right now? IBM Planning Analytics, which we're going to focus a little bit more on in part two of this series, where how do I know where I should go, right? How do I plan out the future based on the data that I have today? And then using IBM Process Mining to look at the past, right? How did I get here? What are some of the things that contributed to why this is getting stuck? Why is this late? Why do I have more complaints in this area of the business? And so what we're going to talk about today is how all these things feed into this new use case of bringing Cognos and process mining together. Let's talk a little bit about Cognos. If you're not familiar, this is a business intelligence and operations platform that allows us to visualize, to represent, to report on large-scale information and data. And we can come at this from a number of different perspectives. We can come at it from the analyst side of things. We can come at it from a data scientist side of things. We can come at it as a business user or stakeholder or line of business, or even just as a general consumer or customer, right? So many different roles can use this information and use this data and look at this information in many different ways. We can break this up into different AI components. So throughout everything that we're talking about today, and what you're hearing in the around the world, is how does AI play a role in the business? And data is, of course, going to have a component of AI integrated into this. And so looking at this from a self-service standpoint, looking at this from a performance standpoint, and improving the retrieval time of the data. And then, of course, it's IBM, so it has to be trusted, it has to be scaled, it has to be secure. And so making sure that we bake in those components into Cognos is an extremely important aspect of this. And thinking about some of the capabilities, around not only business reporting, where we have dashboards and views of the information, we can also look at real-time performance metrics as it relates to true KPIs and SLAs and other things that we need to measure against, and understanding how does this impact my actual business. We can look at this from a analysis and discovery perspective, so I can really kind of mix and match the data. You'll see that we can dig into some of the charts and dashboards and pivot on things and look at it from different lenses. And then we can also look at pulling out specific reports and dashboards within the tool. So now I'm going to turn it over to Michael to cover some of the process mining background, and then we'll get into how the two tools can be used together. Michael?
Yeah, thanks, Jared. And I think, as you were saying, one of the biggest synergies here between process mining and Cognos is the ability to drive different results and actually give more business value to those Cognos customers. So as we're going down that process, I think it's important to understand, what is the problem we're really trying to solve for with process mining. So if you can click to the next slide, Jared. Yep. So I think you really have to understand at a parent level, when we're talking to customers and we're thinking about, how do we gain more insight into our business problems, where our challenges exist, how do we improve those, especially when you're leveraging Cognos as a reporting tool. I think from a process mining and a parent level, we're thinking about it from a business transformation or business improvement initiatives. You have to realize the facts, on the ground as these customers are experiencing, which are 78% of these initiatives that customers are working on today are failing to achieve the business objective. And there are a variety of reasons why this is happening, but even, click again, Jared, even of the 22% which are deemed to be successful, organizations are only achieving about 10% of what they set out to achieve. So we're making progress. Cognos Analytics is helping us report on, what's happening within the business. But one of the challenges, this failure rate's happening at such an alarming rate from IBM's point of view is due to lack of visibility. So click on the next slide, Jared. And so we often hear when we're talking to our customers or different organizations that the primary driving factor behind the challenges organizations are having are people, processes, and technology. All true. But this lack of visibility, is the primary reason from IBM's point of view. It goes to the fact that you can't improve, and I think this visual does a nice job. You can't improve, you can't fix what you can't see. So if I'm a supply chain organization, I'm looking at my reporting and data that's coming through my Cognos, tool, it's great, but it's only as good as the underlying data with it. And when we think about the data is reliant on the processes. So as we focus on the synergy between the two and the lack of visibility, I think it's important to understand, where are we actually driving the biggest differences within these organizations. So this lack of visibility plays a tremendously big part. So with that as a backdrop, I think we have to take a look, next slide, in how we're setting up our processes. So we're thinking about, the fact that if an end-to-end process, when you're going and mapping and modeling these out, these on average take between 6 and 9 months for a complex process. And the way that what's happening behind the scenes is that organizations are bringing in industry consultants or outside experts. They're putting them together with their lean teams and subject matters experts on these processes. And at the end of the day, they're doing a series of whiteboard, sticky notes, interviews, and they're designing processes like you see in number one, pretty much happy path or straight through processes. These organizations or anyone who's actually been involved in mapping, modeling these processes, they understand there's a little variation to it but they feel like the variation is manageable and doesn't necessarily hinder overall process performance. So they think they operate like number two. In reality, and this ties back directly to Cognos and the reporting analytics and ability, in reality, processes actually, when we're thinking about end-to-end processes, they actually operate and flow like you see in number three. And the fact that organizations have no visibility into this is how their processes flow and operate, or if you look at all the black dots, which are intended to represent the hidden inefficiency within these processes that organizations can't see, this is what's contributing back to that 78% digital transformation failure rate, or at least failure to achieve the objectives. And we think about, reporting and tools, they're reporting on what they can see. And what process mining is revealing is what they can't see, these unknown factors that are going to help them drive a greater value. And so click the next screen, please. And so just to give an example, I think earlier Jared mentioned, supply chain and other areas of the business that we're looking at reporting on. So just the diagram over to the left-hand side is a simple P2P or procure-to-pay process. And just for an order to run through the different systems, it's going to have to run through a multitude of different systems, desktop tasks, typically follow hundreds of thousands of different paths. And at the end of the day, the processes just aren't performing as organizations expect or were promised that they would. And if you couple in the fact that employees are having to log in and out of 10 to 19 different applications just to execute that order, it's leading to where there's a lot of master data being out of sync between these solutions. So when I go and speak at operational excellence conferences, what I often hear is, Michael, we feel like we have good visibility in how our processes are flowing. What I've come to learn over time is what they mean by that is, just take SAP as an example. Maybe that's their primary ERP system. They feel like they have good visibility into the four walls of their ERP system. But as this diagram illustrates, just to execute an order, it's going to have to run in and out of many different systems. So we're thinking about the Cognos and planning analytics. Again, it's reporting on what it can see, but it's not able to report on, those hidden inefficiencies. So we're trying to plan and optimize leveraging that data. There is some gaps between it that process mining is actually intended to help shore up, if you will. Next slide. So this is where we see the missing link being the bridge, next slide, to bridging that divide, if you will. And it's process and task mining. And what we're doing is leveraging machine learning and AI to create a digital twin. If you look at that number 3 that I just presented, that spaghetti diagram, if you will, to create a precise representation of that, understand where that hidden inefficiency and root causes of the problems or bottlenecks that are slowing our operations down. And so you can, with that knowledge, you can then report, more efficiently and effectively on what's actually happening in our organizations. How do we start planning and move more towards predictive models that allows us to get around that? So I guess the question is, how does it work? Next slide. So the way process mining works, if you look over to the left-hand side, it's pulling, if you think back that procure-to-pay diagram that I had given, it's pulling log information from those transactional systems, from, say, the Workdays, SAPs, Maximo, all these Cognos, all these different systems that we have. It's pulling the event logs, timestamps, the activity or object that's happening, and it's pulling them down into a core mining engine. And that's what you're seeing at the bottom, the event logs. It's pulling that type of data in order to recreate what's happening. How does our process actually flow? With this, again, with this process information and being able to visualize this, we're now able to start simulating what if scenarios and move towards more continuous monitoring. So we're able to tee up and feed the Cognos customers more insight, if you will, as to how, not only how their operations are flowing, but if we want to make improvement, what are the root causes of the problems that we're having today? If I'm comparing, operations in Chicago versus operations in LA, not only am I able to see, yes, there are differences, here's what one's doing, versus the other, but with their bottlenecks, I can actually, again, drill down to understand what's causing these. So that's in a nutshell what process mining does. Next slide, please. And so, but just before, Jared, before I turn it over, one of the things I want to mention as far as the critical differences, because you're going to get into the solution overview, show a live demo, but in a nutshell, the critical differences between BI and process mining really is that root cause analysis. That's, one of the things that no BI tool really provides today that is helping organizations. Understanding that detail helps organizations in, not only making improvements, but moving more towards predictive and being able to modernize their operations, if you will. So I think the last point I want to make is just the benefit, if you will, when I talk about root cause analysis, is just the benefit process mining holds over the BI is the depth of the analysis. So both tools work with KPIs and data at different depths, but where BI monitors and reports, process mining reveals and those hidden inefficiencies, bottlenecks in the process, and then visualizes it, as well as recommends paths forward to resolving those issues. So, Jared, with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. And yeah, I appreciate the overview there, and everything that you mentioned is spot on, and I think we'll see it in action here in a moment. But just getting into the how it works, I think this is an important aspect. For those of you that didn't know, Cognos Analytics and IBM Process Mining now fall into the same product family, and so that removes a lot of the barriers that we had previously. And the reason why I'm so excited about this use case is because the hardest thing for process mining, and with all the clients that we work with, is getting access to the data, right? There's no magic there. You need to get transaction logs, history data, other kind of historical information about the process. And in order to do that, sometimes you have to have listeners installed, you have to have integrations, you have to have data extracts. With Cognos, you already have the data, right? That's a huge, huge advantage, and just removes a lot of the friction that we see with implementing IBM Process Mining. And so with that existing data, we can extract that either through real-time monitoring and APIs, or we can do this in batch and even manual. But somehow we get that data, and what we can then do in process mining is visualize the process. That's one part of it. So just having a visual representation of what the process looks like is going to be extremely helpful. We can start to do this and compare this against how we think it should work, and do things like conformance checks and looking for outliers, looking for exception paths, and just understanding more about the process. We can start to run simulations and what if scenarios and understand what could be better about that process. If we were to make an improvement, let's not just make it because we think something's going to work. Let's do this in a more thoughtful and predictable way. And so really measuring what that impact would have on the business from a quantitative standpoint. And then we can also find operational insights. So what is it about this process that's going to help me understand and where I need to focus? And so again, not automating, not improving just for the sake of it, but really having a good measure of what we can do there, and then feeding that back into Cognos as new dashboards, new reports, new information, and then we complete the circle, right? So this idea, and this is proven, we've done this, it's really exciting because again, that data is already there, the information's all there, and so we're seeing a tremendous amount of benefit in having kind of the where are we in the business, and then how did we get here? Those two pieces are really playing well together, and it's kind of a 1 + 1 = 3 situation. So just thinking about some of the key benefits, and then I'll jump into the demo. Again, access to the data, that's huge, right? From a process mining standpoint, having that data already presented and already formatted in a way that we can ingest, that's a huge advantage. Looking at that overall end-to-end process and understanding what are all the things that led up to this dashboard being read, right? Again, BI tools can do a very good job of showing you where there's an issue or where there's something out of compliance or outside of your SLA. It doesn't always tell you exactly why that's happening. And so that's really what we're looking at here with process mining, is the why, the root cause analysis, looking back and seeing the patterns and the data points. Is it because it's a user issue and maybe there's a training thing that we need to set up, or maybe it's a data issue and we need to put some kind of a data validation or quantification. Looking at bottlenecks and understanding where the process gets stuck. Really enforcing compliance, right? And having this play a role in our risk management strategy, allowing us to look at this compared to how we've documented the process And then lastly, this simulation and impact analysis really helps us understand and look forward to understanding what we need to do about these issues. And this also has a full circle effect where we can measure the results using both Cognos and process mining to measure the implemented automations and improvements that we've made to make sure that we're getting the results that we thought. And if we didn't, or if we don't get the results we thought, we need to change our assumptions. All right, so let's jump into the live demo. The use case is a fictional Western states auto insurance. We're focused on 5 states on the west coast of the US. Right now, this customer is using Cognos analytics to do things like, having a claims dashboard, understanding where the claims are and looking at data points and pivot points around that. We're able to do policy analysis and customer complaints. There's other business metrics that we're looking at. So I'm going to take you through some of the kind of current state, but then what we really want is the ability to understand the actual process, right, and visualize that in a standard representation. We want to understand why it's getting stuck in certain places, right? I can see that there's claims that are running over our expected SLA, but why? Why is that happening? And then looking at where we can improve, right? And understanding based on this data, based on the information that we already have, how can I make improvements? How can I move this forward? And so what we're going to do is just start with the as is with the Cognos analytics state. And you can see this is our policy dashboard. So this is looking at various customer complaints. We can look at it in a variety of different charts and graphs. It's very intuitive. It's very easy to interact. We can even click in and get specific on things like California. I want to focus in on Oregon. I want to focus in on Washington. You can see the charts and graphs move as I interact with that map. I can go into specific details around things like policyholders, understanding just different ways to represent the data and graphically show in a very understandable way what's happening with my business right now. This is my heat map. This is my temperature of what's going on with the business. I can dig into things like policy details and understand how did the policies break down. So really pivoting on certain aspects of the data, in this case, the vehicle type, being able to go in and say, show me this breakdown by different roles that are being played, or by different vehicle types, or by, and looking at different analysis that way. We can also look at trends. So it's not to say that we don't see historical data here, but we can't chain it back. I can't represent this as a process. I can see trends over time, but that's just data. That's kind of a snapshot in time of what the data looks like. It's not showing me for a particular claim or for a particular policy what led up to this, right? What were all the events that happened that may even be seemingly unrelated that are contributing to this being red or this being out of compliance, right? We can also look at this from a claims standpoint. So this is where we're going to get into some of the data that we'll utilize for our IBM Process Mining example. So this is just looking at different claim information. I can pivot on this through those 5 different states that I see here. So if I wanted to look at California claims, I can look at that. It breaks it down again by data type. It's a snapshot in time of these particular data points that I can use and visualize in many, many different ways and very understandable ways. So it's very business friendly. It's very easy to understand. But again, there's something missing. It's that root cause that we can't do here, which we're going to show how we can do with process mining. So imagine, if you will, that I've taken this data so you can understand that there's probably a whole set of information behind this that's driving these dashboards. If I had a way to extract that data into a standard format, like an Excel spreadsheet or a CSV or even JSON, XML, whatever it is, I could then bring that into process mining very easily. So the example here is that I have data points, right? In this case, this represents almost 80,000 different transactions, different records that are occurring, all within different points in the claim, right? For process mining to work, we need a minimum of 3 pieces of information. I need some kind of a unique ID, right? In this case, the claim number. I need some kind of timestamp or indicator of when this occurred. In this case, I have a timestamp. And then I need some kind of an activity name or description. And in this case, I have the step of the claim that's being done. Now, any other information that we add is going to be bonus, because again, this is about not just visualizing the process, but understanding why the process behaves the way it does, to be able to do root cause. And the more information I can include in that root cause, the better our information, our understanding of the process is going to be. So things like user, who worked on the claim, right? If I see things are getting stuck and it's only one of these 3 users, then maybe I have a training issue. Maybe it's just something that I have to make sure that they're understanding how to, progress that claim or work on that claim. Or if I look at the location, right, or the geography, right, where is this happening? Maybe there's something that is going wrong in Washington and I can fix that, but I need to know that that's actually the case, that that's actually where those things are happening. I can look at the location the vehicle is in at any given point, right, whether it's the repair shop or the liquidator or the assessor. And then finally, we have the amount. So this is a very small subset of the data that I could use. We're using this for a demo purpose so that we can see kind of a very simple set of data. But ideally, we have dozens and dozens of fields that we can start looking at and pivoting and understanding patterns and correlations that are occurring so that we can truly get to the why. Why does this process behave the way it does? So with that, we're going to create a brand new process mining project. So I'm going to use that data to essentially generate and then analyze what's going on with that process. So I'm just going to upload. In this case, we're doing it manually, but you can do this through a API. You could do this in real time. You can tie it into an integration layer. So there's a lot of different ways that we can input this information. And this setup that I'm doing here is a one-time mapping exercise. So once I map the data to those specific fields, so in this case, we have the process ID, we have the timestamp, we have the resource, we have custom fields. I can add as many custom fields as I want. And once I do that mapping, I don't need to do that again. I can continue to upload data as I go and not need to worry about remapping the fields, right? So that's kind of a one-time setup. We're going to go ahead and generate the process. And what I'm presented with is typically going to look like that third type of process that Michael presented, right? Where we have, this is the way it was designed, this is the way it actually works, or this is the way we think it works, and then this is the way it actually works, right? You get this plate of spaghetti that is a big mishmash of all these different activities that are occurring. Then maybe a lot of those I didn't even know were happening, right? Because that's the idea here, is that we're going to start uncovering outliers and exception paths and different things that maybe we need to correct, or maybe those are the right path, but understanding why it's going down one path versus the other is a key part of this. So just creating the process, that's one piece, right? We now have the process. We can see that it's heat mapped based on frequency. So the more frequent that activity is occurring, the darker the blue. I can change the heat map. I can look at it by rework cycles. How many times does this step repeat? I can look at it by duration. How long does this step take on average? We can look at it by cost. That's another factor that I can put in. So if I can tie a cost with either the resource or the role, then I can calculate how much that activity is actually costing me as a business. So there's a lot of different ways that we can look at this information, but let's go ahead and dig into this step, for example. So in this case, I'm going to look at this through a couple of different lenses. We can look at this through maybe the state that it happened in, right? So we can see that California has most of the claims that are occurring, and we can see that on average, they take about the same amount of time, total time. We can look at this by resource. So we can look at this by who worked on the claim. And this one's interesting. For that one step, this one resource is doing 25% of the work. So what's going on there, right? What's actually happening? Why is that taking so long? And so we can look at a number of different factors there. We can look at the claim amount, right? On average, how much was the claim? And so a lot of different ways that we can manipulate the data that way. I can then start to refine the data. So looking at this process, maybe I don't necessarily need to see all the one-off scenarios. I want to refine this down. So let's get closer to the happy path, right? This is now probably closer to what I've documented as my business process. Yes, we have some outliers sometimes, right? When the customer rejects something or someone else, it gets escalated. But most of the time it follows this path, right? What I want to do now is flip this on its side and look at this as a true process diagram in a standardized format. In this case, what we call business process modeling notation, or BPMN. Now we can start to see where the decision points are happening and all the different steps that are occurring in the loopbacks. And from here, I can start digging into the why, right? And really start understanding root cause and dig into why it's going down one path or the other. Why is it getting rejected at the customer step? Or what are some of the patterns where we do see success on going from one step to another? And so just on that simple decision mapping, I can dig into, show me some of the patterns and correlations that are occurring, right? And I can zoom out a bit too. So customer in charge to customer return, that's probably not what we want. We have about 66% of the time, it's when the resource is not one of those 3 people, right? Or when we see in charge to checkout, that's probably what we want, right? Now it's showing that the resource is one of these 3 people. So maybe these are our experts, or maybe these are our super users, or maybe they're just cherry picking and they're getting it right 79% of the time. We don't know, right? So you still need to have stakeholders. You still need to have subject matter experts looking at this and sharing, okay, yeah, that looks right, or wait, that shouldn't be like that. Let's dig into that a bit more. And so to do that, we can start doing things like simulation. We can start looking at what if scenarios to say, if I were to improve the throughput on a certain activity, or if I were to change the probability of going down one path or the other, what kind of impact does that have? Because a lot of times you may have unintended consequences where you improve one step, but that makes the downstream steps even worse, right? Because they're getting flooded with new activities and overloaded, and so it's actually making the process less efficient. And so understanding what kind of impact you can have is a huge piece of this. And then the last piece I'm going to show here is also kind of that analysis piece, which allows us to look at this through different lenses, right? So I have a way to look at all of the different variations that this process can follow and start to see what is actually happening here, and digging into some of the patterns where 13% of the time it's happening like this, which is something I think makes sense, right? That flow is probably what our happy path looks like, but then 12% of the time it looks like this. And then much distant third, it looks like this. This is a kind of a really out of whack, right? So we see all these different variations, and I can start to dig into the data and really pivot on some of this information. That is really going to help me understand the why, and then feeding that back into Cognos as a new dashboard or a new set of information allows me to have that round trip and that full cycle of the further analysis. So with that, I'm going to wrap things up. So let's talk a little bit about the part 2 that's coming up next week. We're going to dig into some of the how we did this, right? How did I get the data out? Also, what role does planning analytics play in this story? We can talk a little bit about some of the deeper analysis we can do with IBM Process Mining. But with that, I'd like to open it up and we can have a Q&A. And Sydney, I'm not sure how we can open up mics, or if you wanted to drop something in the chat, please do that. Or let's do the Q&A, okay. We've got one question, is this being recorded? Yes, it is. And actually, while we're waiting for some questions to come in, Michael, did you have anything else you wanted to kind of wrap things up?
Yeah, no, but just having worked with many customers in the past, been involved with process mining, specifically supply chain customers that I was dealing with, they've always had issues putting together the reports and the time that it takes. With process mining and being able to understand that root cause analysis, they were going from taking weeks and every quarter to taking minutes. And so it's not only a time saver, it's really giving more information in a quick fashion, allows you to get to that decision making a lot faster. So it's just seeing that across the board with quite a few customers.
For sure. So sounds like a pretty quiet bunch. So we'll give maybe one last call for questions. Otherwise, please join us next week as we continue our series here with part 2, where we'll dig into some of the, we'll lift the hood a little bit more, do a little more technical deep dive on some of the ways that we manipulate the data and how we get the data out of the systems. and then also how this ties into planning and predictive modeling and using planning analytics along with this story.
Team, I do see a few comments and questions in the chat rather than the Q&A. So if you want to answer those.
Oh, very good. Yes. So Michael, Dan Weymouth wanted you to mention the digital SME capabilities that came out last December.
Yep, and actually that's part of what we're going to do on the next week's session. We plan on talking in depth about that. So Dan, we will circle back around for this audience on that.
Very good. And then Ed had a question, where are the log files stored? So the logs from Cognos are going to be dependent on the sources of data that you're pulling into the BI capabilities. Those can be third-party databases. Those could be files in shared drives. It can come from a number of different places. The source of information that we use for process mining can come from really anywhere that you have transactions that are occurring, whether that's log files or more formal database transactions or history records. As long as you have those three fields, those three pieces of information, right, a timestamp, activity name, and some kind of correlation ID, you can generate data to input into process mining. So that's a huge piece. Dean had a question, is process mining more of a backcasting tool? Sort of. I would not, I would say that certainly looking backwards and seeing what's happened in the past and seeing kind of patterns that have occurred is a big part of that. But it also is a bit of a forecasting tool as well. And I don't want to spoil anything for next week, but that is something that we see process mining being used both for historical data, but also looking at some of the simulation impact analysis, what if scenarios to really kind of look forward as well. Michael, I don't know if you have any comments on that.
No, I think you're spot on. And that's something that, again, not to spoil it for next week, but that's exactly one of the things we plan on diving into a little bit more. So, yeah.
Yep. And then there was another question about the advantage of IBM Process Mining compared to other tools. So I will share some of the differentiators that we're seeing out there. And something we didn't mention is that IBM Process Mining has another capability called task mining. A lot of times that's what other point products would call process mining. That's where you record human interactions and tasks that are happening on an individual's desktop or laptop, and then stitch those together into the same type of data that we saw looking at the more end-to-end process. IBM has both capabilities, right? So you can do either the larger scale transformational type process, the end-to-end claims process that's going to touch multiple people's systems and desktops, but it can also do the more tactical kind of let's record what the call center agents are doing on a daily basis to understand how we can improve that kind of efficiency. So we can do both. That's one differentiator. Another is cost. IBM Process Mining is typically lower cost than most other process mining tools that are out there. And then I would also say the ability to interact in that standardized BPMN format. That's something that's unique to IBM. Other tools say they have that, but we've seen that it really is not conformant to a standard BPMN model. And so having that interaction, especially as you look at leveraging things like BlueWorks Live on top of that. And Michael, maybe you can share some of the multiple correlations that we can do and kind of digging into secondary IDs, which is a big differentiator as well.
Yeah, and I think what you're referring to is a multi-level, multi-object. But so, I mean, great points. Let me start off from what are the advantages of IBM Process Mining? What organizations are trying to do. If you think back that spaghetti diagram, that number 3 that I showed as how processes are actually operating and where the hidden inefficiency exists, they can't see. Process mining, and our process mining couples with task mining. So it essentially pulls what's happening in the transactional systems as well as what's happening at the desktop level. And it puts those through a core mining engine in order to create a precise digital twin of how your process is actually flowing, based on a data-driven approach. And this is where we differ. I think that's where, Jared, where you were going, the fact that we couple process and task together. we're the only organization out there that actually can create a precise digital twin. So that's tremendously big. And we do that by coupling process mining, task mining, as well as our business rules mining. So we're actually not able to, Jared, you touched upon this earlier in the presentation, but discover why does a process flow this, a certain way. To understand the business rules behind it is significant. And then if you think about from an end-to-end process, if I'm looking at, say, a procure-to-pay process, which starts out with a purchase rec, goes to a purchase order, a goods receipt, and an invoice. If I want an organization want to understand how my process is flowing, across my organization, I'm going to need the ability to, as it moves from system to system to system, to join those objects together, meaning join our invoices to our purchase orders, to our goods receipt, keep that information together as it diverges and converges throughout the whole life cycle. And so we leverage what we call multi-event log, multi-event, multi-object log in order to do that. And that's what's one of the things that's unique. Those capabilities coupled together are really what give us the ability to create a precise digital twin. And then we go one step further where we do root cause analysis. We actually don't just stop there. We leverage the machine learning AI to recommend a path forward. And with that path forward, we say, don't just take our recommendations, let's simulate those what if scenarios. So we're thinking about those business analytics, users out there. Let's simulate if we make these changes, what impact would that have on the overall process or our forecasting, or so on and so forth. So you want to simulate those in order to understand impact as well as ROI in advance, and it allows you to tee up the opportunities, from a customer perspective out there. Hopefully that's probably a little bit more information they wanted, but we're happy to dive into that in further sessions. Were there any other questions, Jared?
I don't see any, no. So I think with that, we are going to wrap up part 1 and look forward to presenting part 2 next week. And on that, thanks, Michael, for the great session, and everyone have a great day.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.